what is Islamophobia? What is this force?
Yeah.
What is this power?
People are going against Islam.
What you have to do is you have to present Islam in a way that it is not acceptable to anyone in any way, form or order. So Islam has to be wiped off the slate of the world.
What you're saying is that there's a planned agenda
Absolutely.
against
planned
Islam.
the West against the rest. Anything to do with Islam, anything Islamic is unacceptable to the Western world. And Muslims, they don't seem to care anymore.
Yeah. Scroll social media, especially X these days, and there's so much anti-Muslim propaganda, rhetoric. Elon Musk jumping on this bandwagon against Muslims, Jordan Peterson, recently Sean Strickland, a UFC fighter, speaking against Islam, Islam's religion of terror, and so on.
Yep.
And this is no longer an undertone, it's clear, brazen.
Absolutely.
And it's out there. People are going against Muslims, Islam.
Yep.
What is obviously we're seeing this in 2025, saw it in 2024 and the years previous as well, and some people say, okay, look, it started mainly after 9/11 and this whole media bias against Islam. But is that the starting point? How far does this go, this rhetoric against Islam?
It goes very, very far. And I think what's happening now, it's simply just not possible to isolate it and see it as an isolated incident that, this is happening now. And even going back to 9/11. Yes, in the very modern history, you might place the marker somewhere around 9/11, but it was happening before that, way, way before. It goes centuries back. The problem is that when analyzing and talking about Islamophobia, the term itself, I don't think people seem to understand what it actually is all about. I mean, it's a very, very paradoxical term. I mean, phobia is meant to be an unfounded fear, where you have no reason to fear something, but you just fear. You know, people haven't fallen off heights, but they will still have this phobia of a height, a fear of heights, you know. So what is Islamophobia? You're saying a phobia, an unfounded fear of Islam.
Yeah.
So when you've identified the cause, it no longer remains a phobia, right?
Right, yeah.
Now, the term itself appears in the 1800s, around 1880, I believe, somewhere in Islamophobia, Islamophobie in French. And then recently, in the 1990s, that is when it's adopted and used more and more in English as well. But the root cause, how far does it go? It goes all the way back into Islamic history. The encounter between Islam and, if you want to call it the West, the Byzantine Empire, the fear that Islam evoked in them is where Islamophobia actually lies.
Okay.
Right?
What fear are you talking about?
The fear is because as soon as the
reason I say this, even today they say there's a fear of Islam.
Of course there is. So it was the expansion of Islam. It was taking in to its fold major empires.
Yeah. Okay.
So we see the fall of the Sassanid Empire. We see the fall of the Byzantine Empire. It's just taking everything into its fold. What is this force?
Yeah.
What is this power? We don't have the time, obviously, to go into how it develops over centuries, but that is where you will have to trace it, right? Now, fast forward, and we come to a time where the Christian world wants to reclaim its lands.
Yeah.
Because of the Muslim expansion, Islam is almost all over the place, and they want to reclaim their the regions, the parts of the world that they used to rule, the previously ruled.
So are we going towards the Crusades now?
We're going towards the Crusades. Before the Crusades, because it's important. Crusades are important. But we need also to see what Islamophobia actually has developed into. Because we are understanding the term in its very limited meaning.
Yeah.
There is a whole strategy behind it. How the narrative has been pushed over the last few centuries is where, especially the last 2 centuries, I would say, is where Islamophobia develops into the monster that it is at the moment.
Okay.
Because Islamophobia is a blanket term. But there's so much to it than we actually see it. There is intellectual Islamophobia, there is cultural Islamophobia, and there is political Islamophobia.
Yeah.
Now, this is the order. So, how do you go about it? Because what you have to do is you have to present Islam in a way that it is not acceptable to anyone in any way, form, or order, not as a cultural entity, not as a religious entity, not as a social entity, nothing to do with Islam.
Political,
so Islam,
okay.
or political.
Yeah.
So Islam has to be wiped off the slate of the world, and they start with the intellectual Islamophobic attempts or the anti-Islam rhetoric. That is when it's built.
So wait, what you're saying is that there's a planned agenda.
Absolutely.
against
A
Islam.
planned agenda of the West.
Right, of the West.
And it becomes concrete in the time of enlightenment, because it's enlightenment which defines the intellectual West.
Yeah, exactly.
That is when God is eradicated, taken out of the equation. That is where any type of metaphysics is taken out of the equation. That is where anything to do with divinity/religiousness is thrown down the drain, right? So now, this is the new religion, if you like, the godless religion. If religion is a set of belief and ideology minus God,
Yeah.
that is the new West. And that is where the whole narrative that is shaped is the West against the rest. So when it's the West against the rest, Islamophobia is actually a baby of xenophobia. Anything that's foreign to that culture, which we call the West, or that ideology, is foreign, is alien, and needs to be feared and made, and people are made to be fear to fear it, so that there is no room for it, so that there is no alternative ideology at all.
Yeah.
So from there develops Islamophobia, from there develops Russophobia, if you like, right? And all other phobias that exist.
So basically that makes sense, because there's also this whole narrative against immigrants, this whole narrative against Russians, there's lots of the other,
Yes.
right? Okay, now my question would be then, going back into history, what were if we're saying that is a targeted agenda against Muslims,
Yes.
against Islam,
It is
against
indeed.
anything foreign to the Western Judeo-Christian
Yeah.
or secular kind of way of life, where does this, what are some of the points in history before 9/11 where we're seeing that this is developing, this narrative against Islam and Muslims especially?
The age of colonialism,
Colonialism, okay.
which coincides with obviously the Enlightenment. Colonialism was
Yeah.
a brainchild of
Enlightenment.
the Enlightenment, right? So it's a control of the entire world.
Okay.
The West wants control of the entire world. We see two major players when it comes to the colonial times, the two colonial powers. It's obviously Great Britain,
Yeah.
the United
Yeah.
Kingdom, and France, occupying major parts of the world,
Yeah.
including Muslim parts, right? Now, the North African belt, the Sub-Saharan belt, most of it were French colonies.
Yeah.
The
Algeria,
rest,
Morocco.
all of those, Tunisia, etc. Now, you have India, which held the most population of Muslims in the entire of the Muslim world, and that was a British colony, the largest British colony. Colonialism had an agenda. And that is where, when I speak of intellectual Islamophobia, that is where Orientalism actually starts to take shape.
Yeah.
And it's intellectuals, and it's the intelligentsia, and it's the academia that are employed to explore what Islam is all about. That is when they start writing about Islam in a way where they're turning Islam into something which is unacceptable, not only as a form of governance, not only as a form of an economic system, but even as a way of life. So everything starts to be rejected. Anything to do with Islam, anything Islamic is unacceptable to the Western world. Most of the Orientalists, you'll see, were officers in the colonial setup.
Yeah.
William Muir,
Yeah.
his book in 1861 when it comes out, Life of Mahomet as it's spelled, Life of Muhammad, the Life of the Holy Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he was, in the northwestern frontier province. He was an administrator in the colonial setup in the British India, right? W. Hunter, the Indian Muslims or the Indian Muslims, he was, employed to do this work. And what are they doing? In their own ways. One is carrying out, say, a survey.
Right.
Hunter is doing it by way of a survey. Muir is writing an academic work.
Yeah, biography.
Biographical stuff.
Underneath his book on Life of Muhammad, he's written from the original sources.
From the original sources, right?
So legitimizing it in a way.
Legitimizing it and presenting it as if it's authentic.
Yeah.
But then what they cherry picked was obviously all up to them.
Yeah.
But so that is where it all started. Coming into the next realm, which is cultural Islamophobia.
Yeah.
Taking all of that material which the academia produced, they introduced Islam in a way which was culturally unacceptable.
Right.
So they're highlighting child marriage, say, the marriage of the Holy Prophet with Aisha radiallahu anha.
Yeah.
They're highlighting jihads to a point. Now, isn't it interesting that William Muir is posted in the northwestern province, which is the hub of Islamic resistance, if you like.
Yeah.
And that is where jihad is being highlighted. In the Indian Muslims, Hunter is highlighting all of these offices, all of these Orientalists. This is what they're bringing out, right? Trying to prove
that this is a monster.
This is a monster. We need to stay away. We need to curb it. We need to finish it whatever way we can. We don't have to have anything to do with them.
I think that's so interesting because this whole colonialism aspect where the Islamophobia spread, it was created, this industry, if you like.
Yep.
It's interesting because you hear a lot of people talking about colonialism, it's territorial takeover, right? But this is less spoken about. Actually, during colonialism, there was a lot of anti-Muslim,
of course,
literature and academic works which was being spread
Absolutely.
and obviously going through society at the time as well.
Absolutely. Now, Muslims missed that chance where they could have responded.
Right.
You do find responses, but they come quite late. Like Edward Said, the Lebanese, writer and academic. You get other responses. You get Sir Syed Ahmed Khan rebutting the works of William Muir, but rebutting them in what way?
Yeah.
Right? But anyway, so that all of that cultural hate that is incited by the West against Islam is all to do with the political Islamophobia, where they want to spread that Islam wants to implement a Sharia in the whole of the world.
Yeah.
First of all, they want to grab any piece of land that they can, and that is where they want to impose a Sharia law.
Yeah.
And look, this is what Sharia is all about. It's about killing, it's about stoning, it's about doing this, it's about doing that. It's all about hate, it's all about violence, and it's all about everything bad. So let's stay away. That is the message.
Okay. Sorry. So was this a fear of? What's this a fear of?
A fear of Islam and its its political ideology.
Why?
Because Islam, when you're a Muslim, you're a Muslim, right?
Yeah.
This is what Islam was all about. This is why Islam remained a fear for the people around it when it emerged,
because of
when
the
it was
strength.
born. With the genesis of Islam brought an element of fear to the society or the societal systems that existed around it.
Yeah.
Because the system that existed around it was tribal. But once you're a Muslim, you're a Muslim only.
Nothing else matters.
Nothing else matters. So that was for the Quraysh or for the other tribes or the tribal system that existed there in Arabia. It was a tribe in the making, which was not through lineage, but which was through affiliation to the faith called Islam. Now that tribe was meant to grow, and they had seen it.
Yeah.
They had seen it coming.
Yeah.
It's going to be, even if you take it in the tribal sense, it's going to be the largest tribe because people would want to go and join it, and there is no question of lineage there. Right? Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. It's all going to be about faith. Who is respectable? Who is not? It's all going to be in the eyes of
black and
the
white,
black and white
Arab
and
and
everything.
non-Arab.
Right. Now that unity, which sees no lineage, this for the West in the time of Enlightenment is dangerous because we must remember that Europe by that time had split into nation states.
Yeah.
So you had Belgians, you had Bulgarians, you had Finnish, you had the Norwegian, you had English, you had French, you had Spanish. So all of these nation states.
Don't forget the Dutch.
And of course, not forgetting the Dutch. So it's almost that type of a division
Yeah.
that was created, of course, when the Roman Empire fell apart.
Yeah.
But now what to do? Because Islam, and then we must remember there was the Ottoman Empire, right?
Yeah.
They were seeing that it is a power which is based on faith.
Yeah.
And Muslims, if they are going to unite, which they wanted to stand behind the Ottoman Empire, although they couldn't, but if they do, they're going to be a massive force which we will not be able to counter. That is where, after the separatist tendency that we've seen of Europe separating into nation states, that is where that unifying forces start to come in. And that is what eventually leads to what we know today as the European Union. They had to come together again. In the name of what? In the name of commerce and trade and industry and economics. That is where they know the Muslim world lacks at this moment. And that is where they know that to take control of the entire world, any ideology, especially Islam, because that is the strongest ideology that stands as a religion / economic power / political power, potentially, that can be a threat to the West.
That is interesting because some historians also say that when the Ottoman Empire stopped developing technology, they say this is when the downfall happened. So it's interesting that, say one of the reasons is that the West was developing.
It was.
In terms of its technology, post-industrial revolution, but the Muslim countries were going the opposite way.
We're going the opposite way. Now, it's interesting. We're talking of the Ottoman Empire.
Yeah.
We must remember that there was another very strange element at play at that moment. Because the West was successfully presenting the progressive way of life to be the Western way of life.
Right, yeah.
Where divinity is just something which is not in the equation at all. It's not in the mix. Metaphysical, spiritual, all of that needs to go on.
Individualism starts,
right? Now, if that is to be the modern way of life and the progressive way of life, you have to give up all of this. The downfall of the Ottoman Empire, which came at the hands of the secularist nationalists, spearheaded by Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, it was giving up anything Islamic to turn yourselves into, give yourself a Western outlook, if you like, right? So that is what they started. They gave up everything that had to do with divinity, with religion, with Islam, and then so much so that even the way it was written, the Ottoman Turkish, even that had to be changed into Semitic, in the style of the Semitic languages, right? And it had to be written in a European way. That is when they gave up everything to do with the old imagination of Turkey or a Muslim empire. So there is an Islamophobic tendency in the West. There is an Islamophobic tendency within the Muslim countries and Muslim nations.
Yeah, definitely.
They want to be at par with the West. And in that, they're happy to give up their Muslim identity. But yes, they cannot completely give it away. What is happening in the Middle East? In the name of modernizing, in the name of progress, they've given anything which was Muslim in essence. Yes, they uphold the Muslim identity because that is required for tourism purposes and so many other economic purposes.
But when you go there...
and
look what's happening in Saudi Arabia.
And the rest of the world. So yes, because, Saudi Arabia has to have that identity that it carries, as, it houses the two holy shrines of Islam, so that will have to be there. And that also is a multi-billion industry, by the way.
Yeah, it is.
So that can't be given up. But as far as being Western is concerned, everything is turning Western everywhere in every part of the world. So, but the worrying thing is that while Islamophobia in the West is rife, as you've just read out some of the tweets and what's going on the social media, where Islam is unacceptable to the world, the Islamic world itself inherently has turned Islamophobic because it doesn't want anything to do with them, which makes them seem Islamic so much that they cannot be at par with the West. So we keep talking of the Muslim world. Is there even a Muslim world? Has it even survived? There is the West, and it's very much there. But is there a Muslim world? What did the West unite on? Because when you took religion out, it was almost taking the spine out of a structure, of a body. What was it replaced with? Replaced with ideology, replaced with economic interest and commercial interest, and that is what keeps the West together. Geopolitical interest, economic interest, major interests.
And the enemies are also the same. So if, for example, destabilizing the Middle East, they're all working together.
Of course.
It's not like just the USA,
Just the
it's
USA.
Britain, France, all of them.
Because the geopolitical and the economic interests are common.
Right.
Until and unless, because the Muslims keep focusing on geopolitical.
Yeah, yeah.
What they don't understand is that until and unless there is some kind of a common interest that holds them together, gels them together, they will not be able to face this mighty tempest that is not only heading their way, it's very much there now.
It's there. That's interesting because I do see that on social media. A lot of Muslims saying that we need to be stronger through commerce and our politics, our power, military power needs to be stronger, so on and so forth. But yeah, it's true because Muslims are now divided into countries, which is also, they're given strict borders post-colonial era, but they're not unified on anything that is, whether it's religious or commerce or anything. But so on that, what would now be the solution? So we know there's this agenda, and I think the angle which is really interesting and a lot of people wouldn't have thought about is this aspect that Islam is a huge power, which is dangerous because it's assimilating everyone together, right? And it doesn't matter if you're Russian or you're American, you're from anywhere in the country, you're Muslim first, right? Today, then, what do Muslims need to do?
Right. There's a couple of things
because when we talk about this earlier, when we talk about unity, it's a term which has a lot of baggage as well.
It's turned into a cliche as well.
Yeah, it has.
Unity in the name of what? Can they unite?
Yeah.
Practically speaking, pragmatically speaking, they cannot. Because they are allies of the West, some of them.
A lot of them,
in different ways.
It's clear.
So Saudi Arabia's interests would be different from Turkey's interests.
Yeah.
Yemen and Saudi Arabia, you already know what's going on.
Yeah, exactly.
So nobody's on the same page. So when all Muslim countries get together in, was it going to be in Indonesia?
Yeah.
It was questioned whether we're going to invite Saudi Arabia or not. Yeah. And it wasn't invited. Saudi Arabia wasn't invited to that convention or that conference of the Muslim countries. Yeah. It's a major stakeholder.
And I think it goes back as well, like when we had the Iraq war, Libya, literally Muslim countries helping Western countries to go and prey on other Muslim countries. So it's...
And another thing that needs to be done is understanding, interpreting Islam. Again, I don't want to make it sound as if it's a cliche or do this and do that. I say this from, I wouldn't say first-hand experience, but I would call it second-hand experience. Because the first ever person to face organized Islamophobia was an Ahmadi in the United States of America, Mufti Muhammad Sadiq. When he landed on the shores of the United States of America, he was not allowed entry initially. He was detained. And why he was not allowed entry is because you'll come here, because we know, they said, the immigration officers, you're going to come in here, and we know that you believe in polygamy. You're going to promote and preach polygamy. We don't want you here.
This is the early 1900s.
This is the early 1900s, 2021. Now, he had to sit and explain that Islam allows polygamy. It doesn't make it obligatory or compulsory for every Muslim to marry more than one woman. Right?
Right.
So, this is what Islam says about polygamy. Now, why was that impression? It all came out of what had been going on. The Orientalists and all of these colonial powers that were in action, how they were promoting Islam or misrepresenting Islam. Muslims let it happen.
Yeah.
They should accept the fact that while this was happening, we were worried about who is a Muslim and who is not.
Yeah, exactly.
So we as Muslims, this is what we've been doing. What needs to be done? Let's take the example of Mufti Muhammad Sadiq, the victim of modern day organized Islamophobia. Things have to be explained. Things have to be understood and then explained. So the West keeps saying Islam is all about, some of the tweets that you were reading just
Yeah.
now, and we were talking about them earlier. It's about rape,
Violence
it's about
and-
violence, it's about
yeah.
this, and it's about that. And Muslims, they don't seem to care anymore.
Yeah.
All they do is, when somebody from the West, whoever they are, when they say, oh, Islam is a religion of violence, we go out, we look for that person's office, whether it was a magazine or where they work for a journal or whatever, a newspaper. As Muslims go there, throw a bomb on that, throw a shell there, do a bit of shelling, burn tires, do whatever outside their buildings, and prove that, yes, you're right, sir, Islam is a violent religion. So here you go.
Yeah. And I also think, so there are also Muslims who do the opposite in terms of they do try tell the reality.
Yes.
However, if Muslims are going to go do this and react, then obviously the media is going to go amplify that even further.
Absolutely.
So it's like a vicious cycle.
It is a vicious cycle. So it's about understanding and explaining Islam. This is what the Ahmadiyya Muslim community is all about.
Yeah.
This is what the founder thought is the need of the time.
Yeah.
Islam and what it means for the modern man, for the modern mind, how it is being seen as unacceptable, and what we need to do to make it acceptable.
Yeah.
Because there were certain attempts being made here and there. When you talk of reform in Islam, the first few names that are mentioned are of Sir Sayyid Ahmad Khan, of Muhammad Abdo, of Jamaluddin al-Afghani. But what they were doing was, they had a tendency where they wanted to explain Islam minus the spiritual side, so that nothing is prickly to the West.
Yeah, exactly.
Why
Dumbing
so?
it down.
The founder of the Ahmadiyya community comes with a message that, why do you ask whether Islam is compatible with the West? The West is compatible with Islam, and vice versa, of course. But then this is what Islam means in the modern world. This is what the understanding of the white horse that flew the Prophet to the heavens is.
Yeah.
Right? And this is what the understanding or the actual meaning of, springs
Verse,
of milk
yeah,
that
yeah,
will be
yeah.
running in the heavens, and what heavens actually mean.
All
and
the
what hell
verses on
actually means.
jihad as well.
Verses on jihad, and telling that, no, this is never going to solve the solution. If anything, it's only going to make it worse. It has made it worse. And we're living in a time where Islam is just being hated
Yeah.
for things that, unfortunately, Muslims have been spreading about their own faith.
It's getting worse. And so the two things which obviously the current Khalifa of the Ahmadi Muslim community has also been speaking about is this whole unity thing.
Yes.
Like, there is no solution to this unless
Absolutely.
you unify
Absolutely.
as one body.
Yeah.
And also this second aspect which you're talking about, that you have to go and explain Islam to people. You can't just react. I mean, it's there. The agenda is there. You can't fight it. Like, for example, look, the richest man in the world right now, Elon Musk, he's tweeting clearly anti-Islamic, Islamophobic. He's retweeting or quote tweeting.
Elon Musk doing that's extremely shameful,
Yeah,
Not only for how intrinsically bad it is.
irresponsible as
It's
well,
not,
yeah.
and it's irresponsible. And it's just taking, when we just spoke of intellectual Islamophobia, he's just carrying that purpose into this digital age. Because what they're doing is, they have completely erased any contribution of Islam into any discipline of the world. Science, technology, they don't even want to talk about what Muslims have done for it. So it's purging, or it's cleansing, or if you like. It's a positive term, so I didn't want to use cleansing, but it's like purging, taking out anything to do with Islam from intellectual history.
Yeah.
Democracy that they're very proud of. Where does that come from? I mean, the Greek literature and the works of Greek philosophers were initially translated by Muslims, thinkers. And then is what, Plato's Republic and his understanding of democracy, etc., was understood by Al-Farabi and then taken by the West and then applied by the West, only to turn around and say, oh, you guys are undemocratic. So that is the irony, and that is the tragedy.
It is ironic because even on social media, a lot of people are pointing out to Elon Musk that actually a lot of your, whether it's X or your other businesses, they work on algorithms, and that was literally started by initially a Muslim, Al-Khwarizmi. So, and people are pointing this out, but you're right, they're trying to basically blanket this, push it under the carpet, brush it under the carpet, and make Muslims as these monsters who are uneducated, and they're coming to take over the West and destroy the West.
But the thing is, how cleverly it's being done
It's
by
clever.
the West.
Yeah, it is clever.
Muslims here are choosing only to feel proud of Al-Farabi and Avicenna and
it's all of the
Ghazali and all.
past,
It's all of the past. What are they doing? It's not that they're not doing anything. The West has very cleverly continued to brain drain the Muslim countries.
Yeah.
They offer scholarships. They, take them into their country, give them places in universities, let them carry out wonderful research and turn out to be wonderful members of the Western society.
Yeah.
They do wonderful things in science, technology, literature, and all sorts of things, But they will never be credited as a Muslim.
Yeah, exactly.
But if you are a bomber and if you are a terrorist, all you need to do is shout La ilaha illallah, whether you're a Muslim or not, whether you've turned an atheist or not, whatever.
Doesn't matter.
And even if you don't, because 9/11, yes, it is an important marker, like I said. Go like 5 years before that, the Oklahoma city bombings. As soon as it happened, they were trying to basically paint it as if it was some 3 people from the Middle East were seen fleeing the scene. So it was like they tried to, throw it on the Muslims.
Yeah.
They couldn't, but that was probably when they were just trying to test the waters.
Yeah, right.
To see how this agenda can be pushed.
We can see this agenda even today.
Even today.
Even the bombings that recently happened in America.
Yeah.
The ISIS flag, which is upside down. All these kind of things is a clear agenda.
Yes. So any Muslim who is doing anything good in the world is not a Muslim.
Yeah.
Right? If they're in America, they're American.
Yeah.
Right? If they're in the United Kingdom, they're British. If they're in France, they're French. They're not Muslim. You don't give them a Muslim identity. They are a member of your community. They are a purposeful member of the community.
Yeah.
Productive member of the community. But as soon as a bombing happens, they're not
Muslims.
French, they're not British, they're not American, they're Muslim.